Welcome to the Stray Pointers podcast, where seemingly ordinary people join us for extraordinary discussions. You're listening to Season 1, Episode 12 of the Stray Pointers podcast. This episode of the Stray Pointers podcast was recorded on November 10th, 2023. I'm your host, Jim Lawless. For links to items referenced in the podcast, please see the show notes for this episode at straypointers.com. Doctor Who is a British science fiction television series that premiered on November 23rd, 1963. The show is about an alien being known as Doctor Who, or more simply, the Doctor. In this series, the Doctor and a changing cast of earthly, alien, and robotic companions embark on adventures in time and space. In celebration of the upcoming 60th anniversary of the character, the BBC has planned a series of special episodes that will begin airing on Saturday, November 25th. This miniseries will be comprised of 3 weekly episodes. The 3 episodes will lead into a Christmas special, The Church on Ruby Road, airing on Christmas Day, with the newest incarnation of the Doctor. These new shows will be available on BBC One in the UK and on Disney Plus in the States. Today I have 2 Whovians joining me. Returning to the podcast, Mr. Rick Lundeen. Hey, Rick.
Hey, Jim.
And our friend from the UK, Mr. Neil Welch. Welcome, Neil.
Hello, chaps.
You actually saw the first television broadcast of Doctor Who on that fateful day in November of 1963. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes, I did remember it quite well.
So tell us a little bit about that. Was there any fanfare? Was there a lot of television ads that pointed you to that? Did you happen across it accidentally?
No, I was aware of it before it started. I was 11. I don't really remember too much of the details surrounding it, but it was definitely advertised in advance. Which is why I watched it, because even then I was a science fiction fan, and science fiction was thin on the ground back in 1963. So hooray! Plus, I was the target demographic, and it was Saturday tea time. You know, the Saturday afternoon was the sports programs which Dad watched, and then the football results and the news, followed by something which was aimed at kids and families. So there I was, ready and willing and eager for it.
So what was the reception like with your schoolmates and friends?
It was positive, but not outstandingly so for the initial episodes. We knew it was science fiction. We knew it was time travel. As a kid, I hadn't really picked up on the intention to make it somewhat educational, with time travel back into Earth history, as it were. And that didn't really grab me that much. It wasn't until the second story, the first Dalek story, that it really took off. That cemented it in the public consciousness, particularly with kids. It was, we had kids going around school with their arms stuck out in front of them, doing "I am a Dalek" like mad. It was the Dalek story was what made Doctor Who really, that first Dalek story.
Okay. Well, my first encounter with the Doctor, I was about the same age as you were, but it was when the series was making its way through public broadcast stations here in the United States, and I saw a listing in it in a TV Guide magazine. It said Doctor Who science fiction, so I thought I'd take a look. And the first episode that I saw was The Terror of the Autons. So I got to see John Pertwee as the Doctor and Roger Delgado as the Master. And for me, the jumping on point, I don't know that there could have been a better one. for that era. But I was a fan for a while, and then sort of after the Tom Baker era, that leveled off, and then I rejoined with the Chris Eccleston incarnation of Doctor Who.
Jim,
Rick,
what year was that again that you saw the first episode?
this would have been in the late 70s. I think we got them a few years after they were broadcast in the UK. So we're talking 77, 78, maybe, or maybe even a little earlier than that, but around the 1977 time frame, maybe.
Okay.
And I think the shows I was watching were from 1974.
Yeah, it sounds about right. Yeah. So I was the last one to the party.
When did you first encounter the Doctor then, Rick?
For me, it was 1980. I was 18, and I'd never heard of the show. I'd never heard anything about it. And one afternoon, I was I don't know, just it was afternoon, weekday, had the TV on, and I wasn't even paying attention, and suddenly this bizarre opening theme tune came on, and I'm kind of like, what the heck is this? And then it caught my attention, and then it was this cool tunnel effect, and I'm kind of like, "Ooh, man, this is bizarre. What is this?" And it was the first episode of The Brain of Morbius from Tom Baker's second season, and I had, unbeknownst to me, the thing started, and it was a faulty copy that we were watching, because there were no sound effects, there was no incidental music, and so you heard every footstep on the hollow stage. It was, the effects were never, state of the art even back in the day. But I had it even worse because of the weird episode. And yet, in about 6-7 minutes, I was incredibly hooked on the show, and I never went back. I was all in.
Yeah, in Terror of the Autons, the Master and the John Pertwee incarnation of Doctor Who, they're on the phone. The Master holds a little gizmo up to the phone, and this cord starts tying the Doctor up, and it's this jerky animation of this cord tying him up. But you just ate it up. I loved everything about, all of those, even the cheesy effects of those early episodes.
Yeah, I mean, John, can you just twist around, make it look like you're being strangled by the phone cord?
Yep.
But it worked. It worked.
So as far as first Doctors, mine was John Pertwee. Neil, yours would have been William Hartnell then. And then then Rick, yours was Tom Baker. Who was your favorite Doctors?
Neil?
I have. It's easy to say which ones weren't.
Okay.
I never really warmed to Colin Baker very much, and I think he's probably my least favourite. But I've liked all of them in different ways.
Mine would have been, probably Tom Baker is my favorite. He was one of the, longest running Doctors. He was a lot of fun, but I really have an affection for John Pertwee. And then when Chris Eccleston reignited the character in the mid 2005, I believe, I enjoyed that incarnation, and the Peter Capaldi incarnation. I like those the best. I particularly like Pertwee and Capaldi because you could contrast them with Tom Baker, who left the action to the supporting cast most of the time, but John Pertwee would get into it and mix it up with his Venusian Aikido and just actually fight with these folks. And one of the things I liked about the Pertwee era, and I really I like the way that they sort of grounded it to, he was sort of stuck on Earth at that time, I believe. And I liked that whole premise where he wasn't quite time and space hopping yet. He was dealing with present day things. And I thought that was interesting. And then I thought it was good when they sort of got away from that.
It was very interesting because, I mean, they were really taking a risk by when 1970 came around I mean, number one, it went to color for the first time when Pertwee started, but also stranding him on Earth, that was a very gutsy move considering what he'd done before. But yeah, that was very cool. And yeah, Pertwee loved his action scenes. He loved his gizmos. And you could, yeah, him and Tom Baker, you couldn't get two more opposite. Yeah, and really shows the range of you could do just about virtually anything with the character if you contrast those two. But yeah, I for classic series, Tom Baker is probably my favorite. Patrick Troughton a close second, and the new era it would be Capaldi with maybe Matt Smith being a close second.
Okay. Who are your favorite villains?
Ooh, boy.
For me, Roger Delgado as the Master was the perfect, anti-Doctor Who, the Joker to his Batman.
Yeah. Well, the Moriarty to his Holmes, because we had during the Jodie Whittaker era, we had Sacha Dhawan do his take on the Master, and then they went like full Joker because he was just like, he's a great actor, but he was just an insane maniac as the Master. But yeah, Delgado, he was first class when it came to perfect foil for the Doctor.
Neil?
Yeah, for me, it has to be the Daleks. They're kind of part of my DNA almost. That even right from the start, it was clear that there wasn't a great deal of money spent on sets and special effects, but it didn't matter with Daleks. There was something about the Daleks that kind of got into your head and made you utterly suspend disbelief and take them on board as bona fide alien creations. And they still are, they still work. I'm not sure I'm happy with them flying, but they're still nasty buggers, the Daleks.
Well, they had to take care of the stairs problem at some point, so it just didn't look good on the resume. If you could do all this, but you can't do stairs. So I get it, but it's amazing that just the design of the Dalek by Raymond Kuzik, the unheralded real creator of the visual threat of the Daleks. I mean, it almost defies description why they're so terrifying, but they are. I mean, it's very strange, and I guess directing has a lot to do with it, because that first Dalek adventure was just wonderfully directed. I mean, and that has a lot going for it too. I mean, so many different pieces. They had such a good team on the show at the very beginning that boy, yeah, that first Dalek adventure was just unbelievable. And I didn't know if you guys had heard that they are colorizing that first Dalek adventure. They have colorized it, and they're because Russell T Davies wanted to he wants to make it more available to audiences and all this stuff, and so they're doing this 75-minute omnibus cut of that first Dalek adventure, and it's going to be colorized. So,
Yeah, I say I'm not one of these people that's against colorization, and particularly, I mean, it was black and white when it started. We only had black and white in those days. Color didn't come in the UK till 68. We only had 2 channels, and that might have been one of the reasons why I watched it at the start, because it was either that or whatever was on ITV, and I've got no idea what was on at the time. But we didn't have a lot of choice, but I think I would have wanted to watch it come what may. And we never, at 11, I never expected TV to be in colour. It was everything that I'd seen was black and white. And I rather like things that I've only ever experienced in black and white being brought into colour, particularly if it's done well. So
Yes.
I'm all in favour of it.
Neil, at the time, were there any comic strips or comic books or anything like that, or was the Doctor limited to the TV series at the time?
As at its start, it was limited, but it came into comics pretty quickly, particularly in a comic called TV21, which was created on the back of the Jerry Anderson puppet series, the Thunderbirds and Stingray and what. There was a Dalek strip on the back page of TV21, which was also an unusual comic at the time because it was one of the few British comics which was in colour.
Now, are you guys fans of the Doctor and other media other than TV and film?
No, I have to say I've not sort of sought out novels and comics. I've encountered comics from time to time, and magazines and what have you, but I don't seek them out.
Yeah, I had the Big Finish Audio has had zillions of audio adventures featuring a whole bunch of the past Doctors, and it can be an expensive proposition, and so I really haven't gotten into that. I used to get some of the novels with the that featured the first through the sixth or first through the seventh Doctors, because they were nicely done and evoked the period, the time period when they were shown. But for the most part, I mean, I really never get the comics. It's kind of like Star Trek. I don't really get the I don't like to go into that medium. I just prefer the TV. If it doesn't happen in the TV show, I usually don't even consider it worthwhile or canon or anything like that. So
Yeah, I've tried, but the comics have never really stuck with me. Those little novellas that they used to have, the little short ones, I've thumbed through those, but I don't think I've ever bought one. I have bought a couple of the fanzines in more recent years, and it's mainly to, thumb through and see the old John Pertwee or Tom Baker shows, and it's more about the interviews and the story behind the story type things that they'll talk about, not really about the continuing adventures. Although the Doctor Who magazine that is produced out of the UK, there usually is a 3 or 4 page comic strip in those, but that's rarely what I focus on when I pick those up. So, supporting characters. Who are your favorite supporting characters from the various shows?
mm-hmm.
Mine would have been Leela when she was introduced. I was a preteen boy, so I think that's pretty obvious.
Yes.
Sarah Jane Smith, of course, and one of my favorites is Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart.
Oh, sure.
I drew the Batman analogy to the Doctor before, and I think the Brigadier was sort of Gordon to John Pertwee's Batman. He tethered this extraterrestrial being to, he made him palpable to the others, the other Earth folk, and I thought that was a really strong character. And his incarnation shows up in some very later episodes with the Cybermen, and I thought that was kind of a nice send off to him. But Lethbridge Stewart was probably one of my favorite supporting characters.
Yeah, for me, it's first off, Sarah Jane. I did like Leela as well, of course. Jamie McCrimmon, Ian and Barbara, Ian Chesterton and Barbara Wright, wonderful characters. The Hartnell team of the Doctor, Ian, Barbara, and even Susan when she wasn't screaming or twisting her ankle. What a wonderful team that was.
They portray now. I've seen some of those early episodes once. But were the two of them, Ian and Barbara, were they teachers?
Yes.
And then they got rallied into hanging out with the doctor, and the escapades went from there.
Oh yeah, and another brilliant thing they did was Ian was a science teacher, and Barbara was a history teacher, and they get their Susan was their student, but she was acting very suspicious, very odd, and they followed her home one night. Turns out it was a junkyard, and they basically forced their way into the TARDIS, and the doctor took off from there. And it was just, what a wonderful setup for a 4-person team, at the very start. Very strong start.
Sure, very good.
I always had a soft spot for William Russell because I was already familiar with him. He played Sir Lancelot in a British TV series before that, so I knew who he was, and he was in some ways the perfect sidekick. I mean, the purpose of sidekicks is so that the plot and other important things can be explained to somebody rather than trusting the audience to work it out from what's happening. And he was a good foil. He was capable of convincingly questioning what was going on, which gave a reason for exposition. So I liked him. I also liked Fraser Hines, Jamie. I liked, oh dear, can't remember her name. She passed away, pretty girl that was in at the same time with Deborah Watling.
That was Victoria,
yeah. And I haven't liked many of the new companions that much. Thought Billy Piper did well as Rose, and I quite liked. Oh, dear, don't get old. It rots your memory. The British comedian girl who's coming back in one of these.
Oh, Catherine Tate.
Catherine Tate, yes, of course. I thought she was not bad. I don't always like her comedy acting, but I thought she was pretty good as a sidekick.
She was very impressive as a companion.
Oh, and Elizabeth Sladen, of course, Sarah Jane was good.
Okay, favorite episode arcs.
First Daleks.
Of course. For me, it would have been the Talons of Weng Chiang. Which I just thought that arc was just perfectly done, and it had the Doctor, it had Leela, the Tom Baker incarnation of the Doctor, Leela. I believe they go back through time to investigate Leela's ancestry, and they get caught up with basically someone who appears to be an Asian sorcerer, and it goes from there. And I thought that was I think that is a nice arc. That's another point that I think if you were unfamiliar with the series, I think that's a good jumping on point.
Yeah, part of that was part of that golden era from the Tom Baker with Philip Hinchcliffe producing, Robert Holmes, script editor, and Genesis of the Daleks, Pyramids of Mars, and Talons of Weng Chiang. I mean, that's for me, that's in classic Who. That's kind of like the Holy Trinity. But there's so many other fantastic episodes, like the first Daleks, Tomb of the Cybermen with Troughton. Caves of Androzani, Peter Davison's Swan Song, just some of the best sci-fi I've ever seen. The Doctor Who companion just had their big poll that they do once every decade, where everyone votes for their favorite episode ever, and they listed the top 10, and not only were half of the stories written by Stephen Moffat, like The Day of the Doctor, the 50th anniversary, but Heaven Sent, Capaldi's solo episode from season 9, that got voted number 1 as the number 1 fan. Heaven Sent. I mean, there's so many fantastic stories they've told over the past 60 years. In a million years, I couldn't give him my one favorite episode, but there's just so much good stuff to choose from.
Yeah, I've got a shout out for Vincent.
Vincent.
It's there haven't been many of them that have brought tears to my eyes, but that one did. And Day of the Doctor, because I had the great pleasure of seeing that in 3D in a cinema with a crowd of other people, and it was a fabulous group experience to watch that episode with a load of other people who had no idea that Tom Baker was going to turn up at the end of it.
Oh yeah, that just blew my mind. I mean, that would have been awesome to watch that in a theater with a crowd, because that was just
special.
You worry if they're going to be able to do the 50th anniversary justice, and whew, they really did. When Tom Baker showed up, I'm tingling now just thinking about the moment when you hear his voice off screen, and oh my God, it was just like.
What did you guys think of? There was a long, drawn-out story arc that was called The Keys of Time. Personally, a family member has the DVD collection, and they mentioned it to me, and I don't know that I hadn't even recalled that there was a long, drawn-out arc like this. So I had gone through and I tried to watch these, and it just seemed laborious to me. It seemed contrived.
It was an experiment, them trying to do a season-long arc, which is very rare that they do, and back then it usually never worked out that well. But it was Graham Williams was the producer that year, and everything was a little bit lighter fare, trying to get away from the darker stuff, and it was okay. There were some good bits in there and all that. The last part for me, that Armageddon factor, that got pretty laborious. It was a 6-parter, but it was an unusual season.
So who are your favorite writers? We touched on this a little bit, but who are your favorite writers and people behind the show?
Neil?
Yeah. It's not something I ever looked at in the early days. These days, I would, Davis and Moffat, obviously. Chibnall, not so much. But the early days, I can't speak to. I love the opening titles, but never really watched the closing titles that much.
What about the Douglas Adams episodes? Is there any love for those?
The Douglas Adams, I'm going to say something that's very unpopular, but there are times I really feel that he's a little bit overrated. I mean, he's a good writer. He's a fun writer. I mean, I liked Hitchhiker's Guide and all that stuff. But, I mean, I didn't really think City of Death, which is like proclaimed to be such a highlight. I thought it was a good, amusing episode. I didn't rate it that highly, but for me, it's Robert Holmes, who was coming up through the ranks, starting in the late Troughton era, and he was the go-to guy. He was the Stephen Moffat of the classic era, and Moffat is the Robert Holmes of the new era. Because I mean, those two, I just they're it's funny because Holmes, for him, he was a professional, it's a job and all that stuff, and he was just as script editor during the first three seasons of Tom Baker. Boy, he just he really knew how to get to the heart of things. I mean, his adaptations of famous stories and all that. He really knew how to do the gothic horror, the sci-fi. He was just brilliant. Some of my favorite stories had something to do with Robert Holmes, whereas Moffat is for my money just as good, and yet he's a fan turned pro. He grew up on Doctor Who, but yeah, I mean, just and that's a big part of it. Some brilliant writing, which really has carried the show through so much. And when other franchises, they're very heavily dependent upon CGI special effects to like really carry the day for their movies, their shows, what have you. Doctor Who's never really needed that. They never had it, but they never really needed it because you had the characters, you had the writing, you had just like these fantastic stories.
Any favorite cameo appearances by other celebrities? I liked it. It really wasn't. I don't know that it added to the story, but I know John Cleese appears in an episode, and I think the lady he's speaking to at an art gallery, she was in the Beatles' Help, I believe.
Oh,
Eleanor Bron.
Yes.
yeah. I had that was in City of Death story I mentioned. I was unfamiliar with her, but of course, I know Cleese, but I don't know if I've ever seen a celebrity guest appearance at any point during the show that really made anything, better, more exciting for me.
Okay, so I will tell you, he was one of the actors, but when I'm not sure that I'll pronounce his last name correctly, but veteran actor Derek Jacobi, is it Jacobi or Jacoby?
Jacobi.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're right there. Yeah.
There's a scene in his appearance where he's this benevolent older gentleman, and he's with I believe the David Tennant doctor, and it becomes evident that he remembers that he's the master at some point, and you can just see in his face and the mood music when he realizes this, without any sort of physical transformation, without any special effects, you can see the metamorphosis happen. And I don't think you could have gotten that, from any other, run-of-the-mill actor out there. I think that floored me when I saw it, and I knew what was happening.
Oh yeah, Jacoby. My God, he's fantastic. He's an acting god. I wish they'd instead of regenerating into John Sim, I just wish they had Jacoby as the master throughout the whole rest of the thing.
Yeah, I didn't care. I like John Sim well enough as an actor, but I didn't really care for him as the master.
There's a reason Jacoby's been knighted for his services to acting.
Yeah, it's incredible. I thought it was an incredible performance, and it was really only for a short time. I'm not sure if it was one or two stories in that arc that he was there,
Yeah, just
but
one.
it was just immense.
Just one episode, and he made a hell of an impact. He really did.
So I know the show went through. I really lost track of the show after Tom Baker and until David Tennant. But then there was kind of a hiatus for close to 16 years, and then a resurgence. But the show has endured. And what do you think are some of the factors? And excuse me, they may be related to a particular period or particular time periods of the show. But what do you think has given the show such longevity?
It's a good idea.
Yeah.
You can, and as you said earlier, Rick, you can build anything on it.
Yeah.
It's
a great concept. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, the mere fact that they pulled a Hail Mary, and when William Hartnell got too ill to go on, they came up, well, let's just regenerate this guy into a new actor. And 60 years later, I mean, who else? No other show can do that. No other show has had the guts to try something like that. And if they did, it probably would fail. But it's just it's a concept that's it's limitless. You could do anything and go just about any direction, and have the doctor. I mean, we've had the doctor, for everything from being a Casanova like Tennant was, to an all-out action star like Pertwee, to anything goes. And you got good, and if you have class A writing built in, there's no end point.
That first regeneration was mind blowing.
Yeah, how did you feel about that at the time?
It was a big wow.
Yeah.
What? He's different, but he's still the same. It was, yeah, and there was instantly a different feel to it, but it was still the same show.
How long did it take for you to accept Troughton as the doctor?
Straight away.
Did he play the doctor the same way, Neil? Or Rick? I haven't seen these episodes. Did he portray the doctor differently? I mean, there's an effort in the modern regenerations to sort of try to have them have a little bit different personalities, but I'm curious as to what those early regenerations.
He went from the kind of irascible but kindly old man, which William Hartnell was, to quirky, a little bit off the wall, and more kind of up to date in his attitudes and mannerisms. But he was still the doctor, and
more of a playful imp, kind of like
yes,
a quirky uncle as opposed to a testy grandfather.
Right.
Yeah.
And then when we got to Pertwee, there were two elements to that. One was the change in the character from Troughton's doctor to the way Pertwee portrayed him, but also the fact that Pertwee was a comedy actor, and suddenly he was this dandified action hero. So we were not only seeing a change in the character of the character, but we're also seeing a change in the character of the actor portraying him. It was enjoyable. It was an exciting, entertaining ride.
Because from my vantage point, knowing nothing, because I never knew anything about any of the actors, in Who, before I saw him, and Pertwee, geez, I mean, on radio, movies, TV, everything, he was always very much a wacky comedy guy. And in fact, there were, I guess, on a couple episodes of Doctor Who, they had when they did like a little, you hear like some radio thing in the background. Sometimes Pertwee would do the wacky voice or something on the radio.
Yeah, I mean, I remember him. Crikey, I grew up with before TV in the UK. When did we first get? I must have been about 8 when we got our first TV. I'd previously, once a week, we went over to my grandparents' house to watch The Lone Ranger on their telly. So I think Doctor Who must have been started not long after we got our first TV. So we had a lot of radio. And I remember John Pertwee from being on a radio show called The Navy Lark. And then after his Doctor Who, he had a lot of success over here playing a comedy scarecrow in a TV show called Wurzel Gummidge. So he's a versatile guy, but his main he was known for comedy and Doctor Who now, but he was previously known for comedy, and he kind of went back to that after his Doctor Who.
Yeah, I heard it was convenient for Pertwee because when he played Doctor Who, he basically was just playing himself. He didn't have to do the wacky comedy stuff. He had it if he needed it, but he was he could really just play himself. In that first season, I guess those where the outfits came from, the ruffled collars and cuffs, those were his grandfather's clothes that I guess he found. I had heard he found in an attic, and that's what he brought down, and he went with that, and then of course they expanded from there. But so I mean that was pure Pertwee, and then we followed up with pure Baker, who if ever there was someone who was perfectly suited to playing an odd detached alien, oddball alien, it was Tom Baker, who I think was just playing himself once again. I mean, because Hartnell and Troughton, they were, they crafted characters, but these two guys, they were just playing themselves, and God bless them because they did a wonderful job.
Yeah, Hartnell had previously been typecast as a kind of an authoritarian type, a rather curt guy, sergeant majors, that kind of thing. And Troughton was an all-purpose character actor, always reliable, doing what he was doing, never going to be a leading man. But Pertwee brought with him baggage, whereas Tom Baker didn't. He had no previous profile, and made Doctor Who into what he wanted it to be, kind of like Matt Smith, I guess.
Yeah, Matt Smith, who was a big fan of Troughton, I guess he watched after he got cast. Matt Smith was watching some of the old stuff, and he watched Tomb of the Cybermen, which was Patrick Troughton, and I guess he just loved that so much. So he incorporated a little bit of Troughton in his performance. But Jim, if you haven't seen Patrick Troughton, Doctor Who, that's probably a pretty good place to start. Is Tomb of the Cybermen, because I just love Troughton. He was kind of the template for a lot of the Doctors going forward. Just fantastic.
I think I'll go back and start at the beginning there. I had just started, I had read something about Sylvester McCoy and the way he kind of started off as kind of a quirky, comical, offbeat doctor. But what I read is that the way that he portrayed the character, the way that the character came across, you got the sense that he was kind of tough. He was kind of a, hard-nosed guy at his core too. So I'd kind of like to see those episodes. I'll certainly go back. I've got the Hartnell episodes on DVD, and I had watched those first ones. I haven't seen them in a while, so I'm going to have to go back and take a look. I've never seen any of the Patrick Troughton ones, so I'm going to have to go. I'm just going to have to binge the Patrick Troughton series. McCoy's going to have to wait, and I'm going to have to go back and see those.
Well, McCoy did a good job, but you also have to remember that there was a whole bunch of behind the scenes brouhaha between the BBC and Doctor Who in the late '80s, and McCoy's first season had a lot of issues because there was a big changeover with a new script editor, and if you want to really get into McCoy, I would suggest start in his second season with like Remembrance of the Daleks and go from there, because as he went along, they got things a little bit more settled, and it was getting better. But if it's a toss between Troughton and McCoy, I would say get Troughton in there.
I will have to do that.
Yeah.
So let's I hesitate to use this phrase, but let's move forward in time a little bit here. And now we're present day, and we've got these episodes coming up starting just after Thanksgiving. How much continuity from the present day shows am I going to need to enjoy these new ones. Is there
How much of the present day or how much of the new era have you seen again?
I probably dropped off with the David Tennant series. I've seen some of the Matt Smith ones, but it's been spotty. And I saw the first Jodie Whittaker one, only the first episode, and I dropped out after that. I didn't watch any further episodes.
If you've seen series 4 with Tennant and Tate, if you've seen that, I think you should be fine, because Russell T Davies, he's very good about including the past and keeping things inclusive to pretty much everybody. And with Tennant and Tate coming back, I mean, and the only reason that happened was because Ncuti Gatwa, the new doctor, he was, scheduling wise, he was unavailable to start anything until I think the end of last year. So Russell needed something for the 60th anniversary, so here we go with Tennant and Tate. But I wouldn't think you need to catch up on anything.
Well, I asked because I had just been looking on the internet at some Doctor Who sites, and there was a reference to a story arc in Jodie Whittaker's that I think might have been called A Child in Time or something. The title was something along those lines.
Yeah, Timeless Child.
Timeless Child.
Yeah.
There was something controversial that happened there.
Oh, yeah. Yes. And before I ramble about it, any thoughts on that, Neil?
No, I'm going to let you ramble. Yeah, I was only going to say that I won't say Doctor Who doesn't do callbacks, but callbacks are infrequent, and they're always fun when they come. But the nature of it, the nature of the show, is that you don't necessarily need to have that much knowledge of what came before. So I would think, as long as you know that David Tennant was a previous Doctor, you're not going to need much more than that.
Yeah, that is true. That just the way the show is set up, you've got this nearly ageless Time Lord who travels in time and space in a blue police box that's bigger in the inside than it is out, and he drags people with him. You probably don't need much more than that in general. And as far as the Timeless Child goes, yeah, that was a really, really divided fandom, because Chris Chibnall, the then producer, decided that we're gonna shake things up and make everything to be true all these years. It's just all a big lie. And instead of William Hartnell being the first Doctor, the Doctor is actually this godlike being who's lived for billions of years and is not even from this universe, and can never die because the Doctor will regenerate ad infinitum. And let's put it this way, and it's all because of an episode, The Brain of Morbius, that I mentioned earlier, because the producers were having a giggle at the time, and they had this scene where Morbius, the villain, and the Doctor, Tom Baker, are doing this mind battle, and on the screen between them you see past regenerations showing up, like who's winning, who's losing. And they show, Baker, Pertwee, Troughton, Hartnell. Then they start showing these other photos of other people, which in fact was the producing staff dressed up in 18th century clothes just to, and it was just, that's it. Could have been Morbius they're showing. No. But young Chris Chibnall, who was like 5 at the time, this seared into his memory. And now, decades later, he's the producer, and he decides, I'm going to make all those regenerations actual regenerations. The Doctor is an immortal being. He can never be killed. And let's go from there and let's do that. And it was a whole mess. And I'll be honest, the idea was intriguing, but it was so ham-fistedly executed that it was just a mess. And it really divided fandom. Some people loved it. Some people hate it. Some people just don't like it. But
are they going to keep it in continuity, or do they plan to expunge?
Well, since Chibnall and Davies are friends, and Moffat, they're all friends. Russell has said that he's not going to rewrite it or change it, but he doesn't have to. All he has to do is ignore it, and if you ignore it, much like the Paul McGann movie in '96, where he utters that he's half human, people ignored that, and they can ignore this, and no harm, no foul. He's just not going to go to the trouble. Russell's just not going to go to the trouble of doing a whole story where he's got to, rewrite that whole mess. So, and I don't blame him. He's only got 8 episodes each season coming up, and there'd be no point. It'd be kind of a waste of time to try to waste one of your precious episodes to, let me fix this. So he's not going to do that. So I think I get the feeling it's just going to be ignored.
Okay.
Let me put a mildly alternative spin on that, which is that when it first came out, William Hartnell wasn't a Time Lord. He was an eccentric granddad with a time machine in his backyard. And everything else, all the Time Lord stuff, and the nature of the regeneration has been added to incrementally over the decades. And it can be, variations can be written into it as you go on. And the timeless child thing is a variation, and they can rewrite it, they can go along with it, they can vary it, they can do what they want with it. They're writing a fantasy series, and it's up to them how they deal with it.
Yeah, they were making, adding rules as they went. In the very first Hartnell, he had said that he and Susan were not from this world, but that's it. So you knew there was something different, and you knew they were aliens, but you knew nothing about them until
you didn't know they were aliens. They had a time machine. They could be humans from a planet colonized in the far future.
Well, that's true. All he said was that they're not from this world. So that could mean quite a bit. It wasn't until the very last Troughton episode that we found out that he was he was a Time Lord. And it wasn't until the Pertwee episode years later that we even heard the name Gallifrey, his home planet. And then it was Tom Baker before you got more rules about Time Lord society and regeneration. So they were just slowly, but as decades pass, you're going to find out little bits about the character as you go. And so when Chibnall threw that grenade in there, that kind of like, what? It was very shocking. And I stick by, and I've said this many times in the past, you could do whatever you want in a show, any kind of story, any as long as it's done well. That's all I care about. If it's great, who cares what you do? And I just don't think he handled the situation that well at the time. But
wasn't the only thing he didn't handle particularly well.
Yeah.
So in the new story here, David Tennant is going to make a return as the Doctor, and I'm seeing that the BBC was very specific that this is now the 14th Doctor. So David is actually he's portrayed both the 10th and the 14th Doctor. Do you think he's going to portray the 14th Doctor as identically as he had done with the 10th Doctor, or do you think he's going to try to bring a new personality to the 14th?
He's been asked this, and I don't think he's going to make a huge effort to change much. I think he said he's approaching it that he's older and he's coming at it from a different age and all that. And I think that may be influence how he plays it. Well, it's kind of like that Time Crash. I don't know if you've ever seen Time Crash. It was a little like 10-minute special they did years ago where I think it was for children in need, actually. And you had it was near the end of Tennant's third season, second season, wow, third season, and Peter Davison ends up in the TARDIS with David Tennant, and of course he's older and all that stuff, but an older Peter Davison, I thought, was just that much more fantastic playing his Doctor than he was originally, and just more seasoned. Even Davison didn't think he was old enough at the time to handle it when he first got the part. But so I would imagine I'll be very interested to see what Tennant does, being 15 years older than when he got the part the first time. So yeah, I'm very anxious. I'm anxious to see anything because I've waited 13 months for this damn show to get back on the air.
Any closing thoughts?
Deal.
Looking forward to it going on for more years and years, particularly if it's got good writers and good stories and good showrunners. I don't care whether it's male or female or black or white or whatever, because she can be anything. But good stories, please, and done well.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm just excited because as a showrunner, as a writer, Russell T Davies, I think, is leaps and bounds ahead of Chibnall, and he was from the first season with Eccleston all the way up through the fourth season, his final with Tennant. I thought he got so much, so exponentially better as time went. I can just imagine. I mean, the man's got that much more seasoning now, so I think it's a huge step up, and I'm. As long as Neil says, as long as the writing is good, stories are good, I'm in.
Good deal. Well, hey, thank you both for joining me today. This has been a great talk. I've enjoyed it greatly.
Thanks for having me.
I'd like to thank Rick and Neil again for their time today, and I'd like to thank you all for listening. Let's do this again soon. Take care.